welcome to Darker Days Radio presents Darkhammer, a Worlds of Warhammer podcast. I'm one of the regular hosts, Chris, and I'm joined by David. Hello.
Good afternoon or evening or morning if you're listening in the morning.
Yeah.
I always get weirded out when saying times on these things. I always forget.
Yeah, it's been a while since we've recorded one of these because Christmas and busy and everything else has been busy and everyone's some sort of work on something and it's busy and busy. Because I've got like a writing contract right now on something. So yeah, we're going to talk about Necrons today in Wrath and Glory because they don't have any rules in Wrath and Glory. So what you're going to get is an overview of Necrons and then also some homebrew stats for Necrons, which I think it's pretty much on spot on. You know, we'll provide them on the blog, and you can tweak them to fit what you think might be more appropriate. It's only for a Necron warrior, so you'll have to you have to do more homebrewing to have like Necron destroyers or immortals or some other thing like that. So that's the main topic. But before we get into that, we should talk about some gaming news, I guess, and what we've been up to. Right. Gaming news. So for the virtual tabletop Forge, sorry, not Forge, Foundry, Foundry virtual tabletop. There is now a 40k Wrath and Glory module for it from Cubicle 7. So if you are into using that type of thing for your games, it basically is a digitized version of the full Wrath and Glory rulebook, which I guess that's pretty good. That's the way things are going. You'll need to have a license for the Foundry virtual tabletop software, but in conjunction with that, then that could be quite useful. I think it'd be good to try and explore it at some point. But if you like using that type of thing, then good for you. I mean, it's entirely up to people on how they do their own online gaming, whether they have a requirement for that. I can't see anything in the example of utilization of maps for games, but I mean, again, that's really depends upon how you're running yours, whether you need maps. But yeah, so that's available. Then Church of Steel is coming soon. We've seen the cover for that last week, and basically it's a guide to vehicles in Wrath and Glory, because that's one thing people complained about with the revised version was, where are the rules for vehicles? And it's like, to do them justice, there wasn't space in the revised core book, so there'll be vehicles supported through this expansion. So I'll likely cover tanks, trucks,
all the basics,
orcs, all the standards, and then undoubtedly we'll also cover void going vessels, so you can have your kind of rogue traders and Battlefleet Gothic level interactions. So that will be fun. Soulbound has got Champions of Destruction coming up soon, so that's how to play as
trolls, basically.
Orcs, trolls, grots, git, ogres.
I'm hoping they put an image of a Gargant on the cover, so I'm hoping you can actually play a Gargant in that, because that would be hilarious.
Potential, quite possible. So that'll be again really interesting for antagonists and so forth as well. But that's good. I mean, they're really filling things out. I mean, that all there is really after that is Champions of Chaos, and then you've got all four of the big groups covered. So that's really the roleplay side. I think there isn't. There's Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay has had out recently Blood and Bramble, which is basically hedge witch spells, and more details on hedge wizardry or witchery, and Hirelings of the Old World, which is a book of NPCs utilized in more roleplay games. So that's good stuff. More extra content now that Enemy Within as a campaign is a complete package of 10 books, really, if you include the companions. At some point I will buy like all of them.
I've got the
I
companion for Enemy Within, but not for any of the others.
Yeah, I really need to just like
Yeah.
grab like the lot because I do want to run it at some point. I'll mostly do it when I can actually start like running stuff in person with a regular group.
Yeah.
Again, holding off certain purchases based on time, effort, etc. Um, right then, on the toy soldier side of things, we've got Aeronautica Imperialis has rules for Necrons in it, and of course you can pre-order that along with the Forge World Necron fighter aircraft for that. So that's another faction because we've had Craft World Eldari added along with the Adeptus Astartes, and the miniatures are really cool for those two factions. And I recently got the Thunderhawk gunship, which, given they're the same scale as Adeptus Titanicus, a Thunderhawk is fucking huge. Like, it's as
Yeah.
big as a Reaver Titan,
They are
which
quite
is
large.
insane. Absolute
Which makes me
madness.
question the scaling in the Forge World 40k one, because that's not that large
It's
compared to what
mostly
you're
the
seeing.
right size, though. It's mostly
Yeah.
the right size.
Mm.
So yeah, that's cool. That'll have some more stuff, scenarios in it, and so forth, and campaign play, which I think is important. Aeronautica is a really cool system. I really like it. Let's see. Also for Aeronautica coming out is the Vampire class aircraft for the Eldari. So again, on the same kind of scale as the Thunderhawk gunship. So there'll be the Vampire Hunter and the Vampire something or other. So one of them's a troop transport, and the other one is a bomber aircraft, which is cool. Speaking of Eldari, there's finally some new stuff for 40k coming up, which looks
Hmm.
fucking fantastic. So we've got new Craftworld Eldari. Uh, we've got new Craftworld Eldari Guardians. So you've got Storm Guardians included in that set, and from the looks of it, given that they're on 32mm bases, they look like they're tall. Like they look like they're the same
Mm.
height as a Primaris Marine, yet or almost the same height as Primaris, yet obviously skinny, which is where because when you compare those to the old Craftworld Eldar Guardians, they were a bit.
They're more dynamic. They've come up with they're doing that whole dynamic pose thing,
Yeah,
multi-part dynamic poses. So they look a lot more like they should do, I would say, rather than just
yeah.
static stood around
This
cube
is
cube.
always the cost of going from what was originally multi-part posable
Mm.
to now what we have is
One
multi-part but like
pose.
monopose,
Yeah.
because while it is monopose, there's a certain interchangeability of parts,
Yeah.
and that means you can get the poses you want, but without the you have to consider that Games Workshop realizes that some of the people getting into the hobby, if they were given the classic style Guardians, would have stuff that ended up looking like complete trash. You're trying to get one arm to line up with another arm, etc., etc., and
And
you can get
mold
some really.
shrink and things, and it never works, does it?
They can kind of end up kind of looking kind of stupid unless you know what you're doing. So that's cool, because that then means we got the basis really for them redoing all of the aspect warriors, because if you've got a good Guardian base model
Well,
from which to draw from
you can then build on it.
in their digital library, they can now design everything else. So we're
Well, if you
getting.
look at the rumor engine, there is very, very clear evidence that Dark Reapers are coming back. There are images
Yeah,
of the Dark Reaper weapon
well,
in the rumor engine.
I think that was a tease of the Autark miniature, because that has
No,
the
no, there were actual shots of the Reaper cannon.
yeah, that the Autark can carry.
Really?
Yeah, the new multi-part Autark miniature that comes out has a whole weapon selection, so it can have like
I know it's got a
equivalent of
couple
like
of
a.
different weapons, but
Yeah, one of them is the Reaper cannon.
well, that's boring. I want more Dark Reapers
So
because those are old.
yeah,
Those are
well, I
big old.
imagine if they've got the design already for the new
Mm.
looking cannon, then I'm sure Dark Reapers are on the horizon. But the Autark is apparently interchangeable parts with the old Autark plastic that has wings. So
Yep.
you can mix and match the weapons between the two and the heads and stuff. So that's really clever, I think. And it's making me want to get a small Eldari force. But the
Well,
thing is,
the Avatar of Kane is being re-released.
yeah.
That has actually been confirmed by GW. and we have seen shots of the hand.
And the thing is, it'd be good to do a new Eldari because actually, I would because they've also said there's going to be new. I think they've said there's going to be new Corsairs. I think we're going to get
Possibly.
plastic Corsairs, which is
That would be
more
amazing.
exciting.
Yeah.
And of course, we've had new Rangers on in that new box coming up. New Rangers
And
and
new jet bikes.
Rangers on jet bikes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I
So
never
yeah,
really understood why they didn't have in the first place, because it's just like
yeah.
the perfect role for Rangers.
It's gonna be cool. I think Eldari is gonna be the hot stuff for a while because
No,
bringing out
no, Cow is going to be the hot stuff for a while if you've seen the roles for
Oh, yeah,
Cow.
the new stupid cannons.
Yeah,
I don't know 40K well enough to really gauge that, but I mean the scale of 40K games I'm going to play, which is like
1,000
combat
points.
patrols,
Yeah.
25 power combat patrols. I'm never going to see weapons like that in there anyway. I
No.
just want to play it like it's second ed 40K with nonsense. That's the thing that's kind of annoyed me is that I can't do a rogue trader combat patrol because
Oh, I'm sure you can work something out.
Voidsmen are elite units, and the weird thing with Voidsmen in the critical mass book is they have a better armor save than the Voidsmen in the Elucidan Starstriders. So they're basically pretty much the same stats, but they actually have a 4+ armor save. So they're wearing
Mm.
carapace. So there's something weird there. I think they need to do a rules because they're basically the same points cost as the Star Strider, but they're elites. Whereas the Voidsman in the Star Strider's book, you can only take that unit once because it's a named unit. And yeah, I'm basically a bit confused. So my options are: I run a Blood Raven force with a Rogue Trader HQ in there for shits and giggles.
Do it as a guard. Do it as Imperium.
Yeah, I was thinking that. I could get
And
a.
just
I
kit bash. That's what I
Well,
do.
what I want to do is I want to wait for the new Garda book to come out and then run
Mm.
because also some of the releases coming up for Imperial magazine, which we'll say in a moment. The next units of troops are getting are Mechanicus. What do you call them? Rangers.
The base ones.
Yeah,
I don't know. I've got lots of them, but they're all turned into
Mechanicus.
other things.
The basic ones with either the hoods or they've got the helmets.
Yeah.
So those are the next units coming in Imperium magazine. So I'm effectively looking at a soup army of Marines, some Mechanicus, and as you say, like the moment there's a new Guard army book,
Well,
get
hopefully, when the new Guard Army book comes out, we'll get more plastic Krieg come out as well. So
yeah, that'll be good.
that's
But of
what I'm
course, what I'm
hoping.
going to run as my guardsman, I'm just going to use the 20 Van Sar that I have because I want basically guard that look like they've been kitted out by a rogue trader that has a sneaky STC. Um, because that's cool. Because
Yeah.
rogue traders are cool. Let's just be honest, rogue traders are cool. So yeah, Imperial Magazine is finally releasing to more regions. It's basically been like UK only for a while, and now it's going to like the US and a few other places. So check on the website, see what its availability is. I will just now Imperium Magazine. Let's website Imperium Magazine. There we go. So it is going to be UK and US, but I think there's going to be a few more regions than that. So I think they said something on Warhammer Community about it. It's really good. I've really enjoyed the stuff that's come out in the first few issues because you end up with you end up with a small smattering of Space Marines. As I said, there's gonna be some Adeptus Mechanicus in there. As the series goes on, you'll also get some Sisters of Battle, so that's fun. So they basically give you soup, which is cool.
Mhm.
Um,
You get
and you
quite
get
a
a
lot in
few.
it as well, and you get it for cheap.
Yeah, I mean the prices of what you're basically paying for, you're getting everything at a 50% discount.
Mm.
Generally, it's about that, which is pretty good. And then obviously the other forces, the Necrons, which have been turning up, and I think I've got a paint scheme for them now. That I'm going to do Necrons, which is spray a silver and then hit them with a blue contrast paint, and
Yep.
then the pauldrons and ribcage, I'm going to do a dark blue and almost black with blue edge highlighting, and then all the eyes and anything glowy is going to be, synthwave purple.
Because who
Done.
doesn't love synthwave purple?
And that'll just be more interesting than like the standard paint scheme, which
Yeah,
is browny, coppery color with green, which is okay, but
they scream for synthwave Necrons. They scream for that kind of neon look.
yeah. But yeah, it's cool. And obviously the other thing you can do with Imperial Magazine is you can pay a little bit extra and then you get sent like extra like combat patrols almost. Not quite combat patrols, but you get sent some starter forces for different things. So you get like a bunch of Chaos Space Marines, a bunch of Tyranids, a bunch of Tau, or a bunch of Orcs. And speaking of Orcs, you can now get the new Orc boys as a unit separately.
Yeah, and you can buy,
And
you can get all the squig riders and things as well now as well.
yeah, so I want to get those and the Beast Snagger boys as two
Hmm.
units of orcs because then I've got literally Gorkas and Morkas for Gorka Morka. I
Oh,
think Gorkas would be the Beast Snaggers and the Morkas would be the regular ones because Morkas are sneaky and Gorkas are, you
punch.
know, brutal and the other ones are cunning. So yeah. And then the other release, which is really important, which is all the naysayers, etc., etc. Curse City is back,
Yeah,
so it's clear. It's what we've. There's nothing ever. No, GW never officially says anything about this, but the fact it's coming back clearly states clearly means it wasn't a splash release. It wasn't just some one-off thing. They know it's wanted because everyone likes Warhammer Quest. It's a great box because it gives you a starter force of undead. It gives you
vampires. Yeah,
wonderful characters using your Cities of Sigmar, Forces of Order armies. It's freaking fantastic for Soulbound because obviously one of the Soulbound books coming up is Ulfenkhan. But the other thing is it's just because it's a great intro to 40k to Age of Sigmar as well. And the other
yeah.
thing is like the reason why we've not seen it, it's production. I mean, look at the world, right? We still have a chip shortage going on which means secondhand cars are worth more now than they were a year ago. Like, which is crazy.
There's
Graphics
paper
cards can be
shortages in America as well. It's all shit
Oh
is
yeah,
going.
paper shortages would like if you try and get trust me, you try and get something done on your house, you're buying wood, right?
Mm.
Good luck. It's gone up like 4 or 5 times in price. It's pretty insane.
And then we've got our wonderful government doing stupid things, which
Yeah, and then you combine Brexit into the mix for Games Workshop, and you've just got and of course COVID restrictions and everything. It's just a clusterfuck of
mm,
everything. So it's good
yeah,
that it's coming back.
I was always hoping that it would come back, and I knew it was never meant to be a splash release, but it was just I think what annoyed me with it was the way that GW handled it. They just didn't give any information about. If they'd have just been open with it, I think a lot less people would have been pissed off.
Yeah, I know. I think it's because they like to try and manage
Mm.
expectations quite a lot, and sometimes that's better by not saying anything, and other times it is better by being quite honest about stuff. Anyway, so it's coming back, and it's coming
Woo!
back with expansions, even
Yay!
cooler, and it's going to come back with mostly some White Dwarf support. I'm sure White Dwarf has had articles shifted around because of this. So yay. I'm really looking forward to it, and I've started painting my Cursed City set finally, like a year later. As things calm down a little bit at my end of things, so I am pretty much going for the studio paint job on the skeletons because I think they actually look kind of good.
Yeah, that's what I did with mine. There's pretty much studio look. The zombies are a little bit different. Screw the amount of detail they put in that.
Yeah, right. And then I'll see where I go with some of the other bits, like the characters for certain. I think the characters I'm going to do, not the characters, the good guys. I'll do
Mm.
last because each one is You can't batch paint them;
No,
they're
they,
all
they they need a little bit
individuals.
of care and attention because they're so nice.
But that's basically all the gaming news I think of significant interest that's Games Workshop related.
Yep.
I will say I've caught up on watching all of the animations on Warhammer Plus, and Angels of Death was all right. it was fun, but it was all right. But I think some of the later episodes of Hammer and Bolter are really significant and really interesting.
Mhm.
There's one which is Cadia Stands and is really brutal and involves Tyranids. And it's just
Stadia
horrible.
doesn't stand.
Um, I thought it was fantastic. There's another one which is called what was it called? Kill Protocol, and it's about an Adeptus Mechanicus searching this war-torn world for archaeotech, and that was also really good. And something in that happens which is just so brutal. I can't really explain it. I don't want to spoil it. And the other one I really enjoyed was there's one which is about the Sisters of Battle, and about their faith in saints and so forth. And I just think a really good viewing for Wrath and Glory players because they're very you could see those could be the germ of a larger story, and
Mm.
because they're not just battlefields and tanks and legions of troops and stuff like we see 40k game, the war game. I think it just gets you more into the setting and about the nuances
Yeah,
of
I think
what goes on.
a lot of those kind of when we in the days when we got into it and were working for Games Workshop, we had the comics and things where you'd see those
Yeah,
individual storylines of smaller people over this kind of large scale stuff that is generally what we see. I was hoping I don't subscribe to Warhammer Plus. I'm a cheapskate. But I can imagine something like Hammer and Bolter is very, very good for that, whereas maybe Angels of Death is not, because that's obviously a much grander scale conflict.
it isn't. Isn't it, it's still Angel Death is still a good model for a Wrath and Glory Space Marine game. And it's
Space
actually
vampires.
it gives you a good basis of a mixed party almost because there's certain other characters in there which are like the captain and the crew of the Space Marine Void ship,
Mm.
the battleship,
Yeah.
and they're just regular human. But the fun thing is like how much they afford each other respect in their respective roles because obviously the respect given by this captain to the Marines because obviously they are the angels of death. They're the emperor's
Mm.
will made manifest. Yeah, in anything when it comes to like obliterating things in space and anything to do with that, they afford the captain all the respect that's required because it's like you know what the fuck you're doing. You're flying this ship. You're in charge.
Yeah, we're not
So
going to mess with that side. We don't understand ships. Put us on the ground and we'll do whatever we need. But space,
so
what's that?
it's really good. It's good in that respect. So I did
Mm.
enjoy it still. It'll be good when we start getting the Age of Sigmar animation coming up very soon.
Yeah, I'll be intrigued to see how they pan out and what they look like.
And I've watched some, and I will watch a few more of the painting guides that they do in the video content. Those are also really good. Do you know what they're missing? They're missing a good narrative campaign of like Necromunda on there. That would be fun.
Yeah, they
Like,
need to
yeah, they
kind of
play the game, but you want the story. That's just the players just
yeah.
nattering.
Yeah, they seem to have like the Tale of Four Gamers stuff doesn't seem to be as big as it used to be.
Yeah.
I'd love something like that where you've got the Tale of Four Gamers creating the campaign as they're going along and the stories of things. So they've released all the rules for these kind of things, but they
Mm.
just don't seem to then do it in the White Dwarf and stuff. Oh
I
well.
think right now it's quite difficult as well, obviously with the
Mm,
restrictions. So
yeah,
there's an element of that in there. Anyway, I think we can go on to the main topic, can't we? What
I think
hobby
we've
have you been doing? Actually, let's talk about hobby before we
hobby.
finish. Let's talk about hobby. What have you been painting? What have you been doing?
Um,
You've been writing your
um,
thesis, so you haven't been doing any hobby.
yeah, I have no hobbies at the moment because I'm thesis writing. I've actually started doing some hobby today. I thought I'd actually get around to it. I'm converting up some of the Age of Sigmar Chaos Knights into Techno Barbarians for my.
Nice.
I'm probably going to run it as a Gene Stealer cult army, but it's basically a Techno Barbarian army.
The new Dark Oath from Red Harvest would
Yep.
be really cool for that, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. I've got
I should
no,
buy
I've
some
got rid
more
of
of
those.
those just for that.
I did have the ones from the first box, the beastie ones from the first box,
Untamed Beasts, yeah.
Untamed Beast, but I for some reason I gave those away. I don't know why. Oh well.
Yeah, as I said, hobby wise, started on Curse City. I've got, like I said, a bunch of Necrons and to paint, which I'm going to do in a I say, do them rather quickly. I think some Chaos Spawns because I had them. Because they're good for Warcry and they're good
Mm.
for Necromunda.
You can put them in most things, can't you? So
Good for the fact that I've got like I say, once I put together the stuff from Red Harvest, my I really need to get the Slaves to Darkness army book, and I've got to get all the Age of Sigmar army books I don't have once they're updated to the new edition, because I then have a Slaves of the Darkness army. I've got it literally is just all the all the gang, all the mobs, all the
they just
cultists from Warcry. It's going to be the
yeah,
most eclectic little army ever. How good it is, I don't give a stuff.
it'll look good on the table.
Be like, what's this doing? Why is this unit able to do that? Why is that unit able to do this?
Yeah.
They'll be led by Watchcaller of the Dark Oath, the one
The witch,
from
yeah, or the hag
uh
lady.
what's she? No, not that one. No, the Dark Oath from the Hunters from Underworld, with her hand outstretched with the glowy,
Yeah,
because she's a hero. So that's my commander. So it's very Dark Oath cults themed army with a chimera chucked in for good measure.
because
I've
who
also
doesn't
got
like beasties?
I've also got a Sphinx on the way as well. So
Ooh,
that'll just be another monster. Lots of weird monsters, lots of cultists. It's nonsense. It's a soup army. It's my Age of Sigmar soup army. That's what it is. And as I've painted a bunch of, my Blood Ravens are all up to date painted. I've got another 5 of them to paint, but it's a really dead easy scheme. Blood Ravens are cool. I do like them.
you've also been building a corpse starch pit.
Yeah, so I
Yeah.
got the silo for Necromunda. I got another one of those because I wanted to be able to stack one on top of the other on my Necromunda table, because that's that ends up being that'll end up being like 10 inches tall. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
So really high platform, or obviously side by side, just a big block of terrain.
Mm.
But also to add some variety to it, when the top is not covered, it's a corpse starch. It's a corpse starch series XV Ninja Foodie blender. So it's got
Human Ninja Blitz a thing.
yeah, so I just basically put some green stuff in there so it had some way to embed the skulls from the Placid Skull sprue. So they're stuck in, and then,
Never have
sloshed
too many skulls.
sloshed Flesh Terror Red on it, because that's a good bloody colour. Left it to dry, and then I've got Vallejo water effects and just put on the second layer of that, and that's going to take another 24 hours to dry, and then that will look quite wet.
Gory.
It should shrink enough so that some of the skulls protrude up through the surface, so it gives the effect of what I want. I might try and put another sheen of a contrast paint on top of the translucent layer, because that will then
I
give
think
some
that
depth.
would remove the sheen from it, unless you water the contrast paint down, because they're quite matte,
Uh,
I find.
it might be that, or I use a red ink. I've got red ink I could use.
I'd probably go for an
Uh,
ink.
or it might be even a case of mix up a bit with the water effect
Yep, that would work.
and layer it in, or brush it on, essentially.
Or get some blood for the blood god.
Yeah, I think I've got some of that somewhere, maybe. But yeah, that's fun. So once it's dry, then I can paint it up, and that's my. And I do want to get another one of those vats, because I do like the height that they give to the game. There's just something about that's the one thing I've always looked at, and it's really pissed me off a little bit, is how incompatible the sector imperialist terrain is with
Mm.
the Necromunda Zone Mortalis walls, as in you get the same height and everything, but they're not the right width, so they don't fill up the spaces in the same way, and it's just kind of that's a little annoying.
It's not as modular as it could have been.
Yeah, whereas Necromunda stuff with Sector Mechanicus works, of
Very well.
course, incredibly well together. So it's just one of those things, isn't it? I do have the old, the old Sector Imperialis, the old edition of Sector Imperialis stuff, which is thinner. I've
Yeah.
got the Sanctum thing,
All right.
the big
The big one.
Aquila doorway.
Yeah.
So because I chucked the rest of it because it was secondhand and it was like compared to the Necromunda train, not as good. So I kept that bit because I might try and somehow work that into the Necromunda train as like a
Mm.
big like piece. I don't know. I'll figure it out.
I've
Yeah,
got
that's
all the
hobby.
built.
That's
Yeah,
hobby.
that's probably. Anyway, we should probably talk about other
Yeah, we should
things.
rattle through this. So the next
Egyptians
we're
in
gonna
space.
about Necrons, yeah. Okay. Shall I start and then I'll hand over to the history bit to you.
Yeah, sure.
So, what are Necrons? Everyone's going to ask. So, Necrons, they are immortal robots of living metal. They have no souls. They have had by biotransference eons ago their minds put into robotic bodies to basically turn them into living weapons and also to overcome their their organic forms limitation. Of course, there's been with that.
Yeah, just a
They're
few.
they're ancient enemies of the old ones. Though it was a weird like it's very hard to say who won or didn't in the war in
Yeah,
heavens. It
we'll
was
we'll
very
we'll,
much a we'll
we'll
get
cover
into
that
that.
in detail.
Obviously, they want to rule the galaxy. They
Who
want
doesn't?
to do it in a way that they basically take all living matter so that they can resurrect themselves in organic form.
And stop a certain force that is on its way, possibly.
Oh yeah, they really don't like the Tyranids because of that. Which is cool. I kind of like
Yeah.
the Necrons really hate the Tyranids. Like
Yep.
because the other thing the Necrons really hate is chaos because chaos is chaos. It's disorder. It's psychic energy. It's this raw psychic potential that could do anything. Whereas the Necrons are essentially the abstract bleeding edge of arcane science. I think is the best way to
Yeah.
describe them. So whereas like you would do teleportation and travel through space by going through portals that blip you the warp or whatever, the Necrons do all that by basically doing space folding and true
By
kind of
science.
they're basically Star Trek shit gone, tuned up to the max. Whereas obviously everything else is, wizardry and psychics. So and then the Necrons are ruled by the Tetrarch. We're going to murder some names in this. Cesarech, the Silent King, and
Zarek,
there's
I think it's
Zarek,
called.
the Silent King, and then there's two Pharaons. There's many dynasties, so they have an ancient Egyptian theme going on, which is cool. They're basically Tomb Kings in space,
Yep.
and essentially, since they didn't exist as an army until essentially the tail end of second edition, where we
Yeah.
got the first Necron models, and then in third edition they expanded a little bit, and then finally we got an army book, and then plastic, and essentially in the timeline they're just waking up at the tail end of the 41st millennium, and they're all these ancient worlds where you've got the Adeptus Mechanicus going, oh, look at all this ancient tech, wonderful. Oh no, it's a tomb world where legions of undead, robotic warriors are waking up. And there's various toys in the Imperium's toolbox, which happen to be Necron in nature.
But
Phase
don't tell
phase
anyone.
weapons and other things. And yeah, the design of them hasn't actually changed too much. We saw some of what they were kind of like, as I say, back with Second Ed, but
Mm.
actually their design is all the way back with Chaos Robots, back in Rogue Trader,
Yeah.
Space Crusade, and Epic.
Yeah. They still had the big shoulder pads back then.
Yeah, so that's in a nutshell what Necrons are. But David, what about their history? What makes them
Yeah.
interesting?
Yeah. So their history is kind of evolved over the various editions because they weren't one of the original ones. They didn't, as we say, they didn't really get a codex until fourth edition, and they've only started to become now more prominent. So the history is still kind of a growing thing. But what we do know and what we found out from various codexes and things is this. So 60 million years ago, the race that became the Necrons, the Necron tier, they lived on a small world that was actually horrendously irradiated by their local star. And so it kept their lives quite short. But they did they did manage to survive, and they ended up with a dynasty system. They were ruled over by dynasties that were kind of designed to rise quickly and fall due to their short lifespans. So the dynasties ended up with short lifespans. And because of these short lifespans, the Necrons built around the concept of being of the dead. They were kind of worshippers of the dead, and their largest buildings and things were venerating the dead. And so as they kind of evolved and progressed and learned science, they decided that, well, our sun's killing us, so let's try and escape that and move into the stars. And so they did. However, this didn't work. They embedded in their the cancers were so embedded within their genetics that going across the galaxy didn't help. However, though, expansion through the galaxy united the warring dynasties into a common goal. So there's no more fighting there. It was more about trying to save the race of the Necrontyr. But because of their short lifespans, they went back to fighting each other. And you ended up with something known as the War of Secession. So they'd spread across the galaxy, but then they started to fight for power within themselves. And during this time, Zarek came to power as the Silent King. The position of the Silent King was meant to change regularly between dynasties, because obviously dynasties grow and then fall. And so the Silent King was meant to change. Zarek was not too happy with the way the destruction was happening. He wasn't too happy with the Necrontyr beating each other up and killing each other. So he looked for a way to unite them. And this is where we see their ancient enemy come in. The Old Ones. They were the perfect target. These were near immortal lizard people. And were the race that then went on later in the story to make more races. We'll come to that later, though. And so Zarek went, here, guys, these guys live forever. That's not fair. Go beat them up. And so they ended up with the War in Heaven. This is kind of like the start of the War in Heaven. The War in Heaven goes on for a very long time because the Necrontyr are jealous of the immortality. The Old Ones, they had the Webway, which the Necrontyr could not enter. But the Necrontyr were more technologically advanced. They had better weapons, but because they couldn't travel as quickly, they were slow and unable to respond to the movements of the Old Ones. And this meant that the Necrontyr were beaten back to their home world. And a new War of Succession begins because, well, the War in Heaven didn't really go very well. And so Zarek looks for a new way to bring them together again. He's still not happy that the Necrons aren't united. The point in this really confuses me. Zarek seems to stay around for a very, very long time, despite their short lifespans. So I'm a little bit confused as to the timelines on these. But it was at this time, as they were looking for a new way to unite the Necrons, the Catan turned up. These are beings of energy who feed off stars. Basically, they're star vampires. They were the first beings in the universe, and they're born of energies swirled around at the time of the recombination as the first atoms began to form stars. In them, the Necrontyr saw them as gods, and they began to worship them. They were given physical form. The Necrontyr wanted to kind of communicate better with them, so the Necrontyr built physical forms for them. And by the process of transference, they gave them living metal bodies. The metal is known as necrodermis. And so the Catan then went, oh, we've got physical bodies. Oh, these are fun. And they decided to enjoy the pleasures of the flesh, so to speak. And the electromagnetic energy given off by the Necrons, or the Necrontyr, became kind of a new form of food for the Catan. And they found it a lot more tasty than the bland energies of stars. And so they started to crave more and more energy from the Necrons. And so the Deceiver, surprisingly named after his way of being, turns up and says hi to the Necrontyr, but he hides his true nature as he is the Deceiver. And he makes a deal with Zarek. Basically, they played the Necrons' desire to have an immortal life. And so the Catan would give them immortality if they helped them defeat their old enemy, the Old Ones. So the Catan fulfilled their side of the bargain, but not in the way that the Necrons had really hoped. They gave them new bodies and immortal bodies made of the same substance that the Necrons had given the Catan, necrodermis, so the living metal. The process of biotransference, where they took their souls, the organic bodies, into the metal ones, began. And it involved the destruction of the organic bodies. However, this was not the only thing that happened when the biotransference occurred. As Zarek went through the process and saw the effects on his people, he realized the mistake he had made. After he came out, he felt hollow and empty inside, as if something great had been ripped from him. And he realized that the hollowness he felt was actually the loss of his soul. And the biotransference was ripping the soul from the Necrontyr. Only the strongest willed managed to hold on to their souls and any semblance of their former existence. And as billions and billions of Necrontyr went through the process, Zarek realized his mistake a little bit too late, and he'd basically damned the entire race to being a species of immortal, soulless robots. Now, it was also at this time the newly created Necrons then decided to fulfill their side of the bargain because, well, a bargain's a bargain, and they went back to war with the old ones. And this is where we see a ramping up of the war in heaven, and basically they decimated most of the galaxy with this. The old ones were defeated, and as this happened, the Catan fed and glutted themselves on the energies of the life forms that were lost on planet and planet after planet as they were destroyed. Towards the end of the war, and kind of what sealed the fate of the old ones, was that they managed to gain access to the webway. And I'm going to butcher a name here. Nyardrazeth, the Burning One, who desired access to the psychic energies in the webway, showed the Necrons how to access it. And so they built what is known as the Dolmen Gates. This gave them limited access to the webway. It was unstable, but it was enough for them to kind of affect the tide of the war. So they entered into the webways. For a long time, the Catan and Necrons managed to rule over the younger species, and they were cruel overlords. What have I written here? It is not known why it happened, but the Eldari stories say that their laughing god, one of their gods, turned up and tricked the Catan, known as the Outsider, into turning on its own kind, showing it that the Catan are tasty as well and have way more power than those small, squishy, fleshy things. And so a kind of civil war broke out between the Catan, which decimated. It took millennia, but over time, the Old Ones genetically engineered warp-sensitive species, the Eldari, the Crocs, who are the early orcs, and other species. And this was kind of their final gambit to fight against the Necrons. These species were brought to fight back against that brutal rule that the Necrons were doing. The onslaught from these psychic species drove the Catan and Necrontyr empire back. The Immaterium was anathema to the soulless Necrons, and the Old Ones and Eldari drove them back. This united the Catan to find a way to fight back against the warp, and they built pylons all around the galaxy, as those ones we see, or we did see on Cadia before it disappeared into nothingness, out of black stone. These were set up to seal the warp from the galaxy good. However, before they could complete this, catastrophe struck, and the young psychic species, their growing pains, trauma, and destruction through the long wars with the Catan was echoed in the Immaterium. The billions upon billions of souls that were killed in the war in heaven suddenly flooded into the Immaterium and coalesced. Old entities that existed fed upon the psychic energies of these souls, and the realm was torn asunder to form the realm of chaos. And this released a race known as the Enslavers into the webway. Warp-spawned entities who dominated the minds of the weaker, younger race. And so after that, Zarek saw his chance. With the Catan being weakened and Zarek wanting revenge for what they had done, he led a rebellion against the Catan. With their arrogance, because they basically see themselves as gods as well, the Catan did not see this coming. So the Necrons released all their might, all their zappy weapons onto them. Some of these weapons were so powerful that they actually used the energies of the universe itself. However, the Catan are kind of immortal star-spawn space vampires. And so rather than being killed, the Catan was shattered into thousands of smaller and less powerful fragments or shards. So it wasn't a true success, really, but it was enough for the Necrons to get themselves from under the yoke of the Catan. And the shards were gathered up and bound into a multi-dimensional tesseract labyrinth. This destroyed the Triarch and millions of Necrons, however, and the Silent King now controlled the destiny of his own race once again. So, weakened by the war with the Old Ones and Catan, and seeing the rise in power of the Eldari, the Necrons realized their time of galactic dominion was basically over. They'd spent themselves too much. And also knowing that the Eldari power would not last, despite their long lives, the Necrons were now immortal and could bide their time. So Zarek ordered the remaining Necron cities to be transformed into great tomb complexes with stasis crypts. And his final command was to order the Necrons to sleep for 60 million years. Once the last tomb was sealed, Zarek destroyed the command protocols he used to control the Necrons. He had failed them. And so, without looking back, he boarded his ship and flew into the void of intergalactic space. Aeons passed, and the galaxy changed as the Necrons slept.
Cool.
To carry on with the next bit. The Great
I'll do
Awakening.
next bit. Yeah. So we'll just quickly go over some of the bits that are there. So the important thing is that like the war with the Necrons is tied innately to the
Chaos.
creation of the realm of chaos. It's not around the realm of. It isn't during with the creation of the realm of chaos that the chaos gods come into being. That takes a little bit longer. From my understanding, that the Chaos Gods essentially turn up and begin to finally coalesce around about like the Middle Ages of humanity. But the seeds are sown essentially with various demonic entities, and in some respects the corruption of the Eldari gods is also sown in there. Because we're going to see that with Carmentia Kane essentially being driven a bit mad. And the interesting thing is things like the enslavers. I think those would be a very interesting kind of enemy to bring into
Definitely
into Wrath and Glory.
Going on, you could, in a way, with that, you could kind of turn it into a weird dungeon crawl as you're flowing through the webway yourself, somehow hunting them down.
Yeah,
quite cool story to do.
And of course, a lot of this is all tied up with, the creation of the Blackstone fortresses, which we've seen that there is another one which appears in a lonely bit of the galaxy, and of course is the focus of the Warhammer Quest Blackstone Fortress game. I can't. Well, spoiler alerts is there's something related to Blackstone stuff, which is in Angels of Death, actually. So worth watching for that. But yeah, I mean, it's the Necrons, and this history of the Necrons, we should also point out, is a retcon of their original version in 3rd edition. So Necrons originally were led by the Catan. And I think that's parallel of the Catan to the Chaos Gods has been kind of like just been removed, and now we have this idea of that the Catan are the shattered entities that are in effect enslaved by the Necrons, and using their war engine. And of course, all these tomb worlds are and Blackstone, this Noctilith that they create, which is psychically attuned, is the focus of research by various groups like the Adeptus Mechanicus, and of course various heretical groups with Imperium. So we're going to fast forward 60 million years to effectively the 41st millennium, but before then, in fact. So the Necrons start waking up. So over the millennia, many tomb worlds, they've been lost. Planets get destroyed all the time, it seems. There's war and age. Its systems fail. The status fields fail. Places get ransacked. The Eldari realize a planet is a tomb world and annihilate it. Things like that. But the Great Awakening begins, and likely begins a little earlier than the Necrons really wanted, because they were waiting for the Eldari to be more like really have died out, and other races to have died out. And of course, things never go to plan. So the first Necrons wake up during the Great Crusade, in fact, and of course the things that I think seen are a few lonesome rogue, Necrons. They don't see the full might of this ancient race, which mostly leads the Imperium at that time to just think they're the last vestiges of an ancient race that has properly died out. But then many more begin to wake up over time. And when they do so, the Necrons, of course, over that time are, they're kind of zombie-like. The coding within them has become corrupted, has essentially fractured and fallen apart. So they call them as having tomb mind deep spirits. So again, they're kind of mindless Necrons that you come up against. And we see some of this in other places. If you only have to read Gorka Morka, where you see some Necron, or at least hinted at. So it takes decades for a Tomb World to fully awaken. And of course, there's more wake up and certain Tomb World to wake up, which have various leaders of dynasties. That's when full command codes, we could almost say, are distributed to wake up more Tomb World. And once they wake up, the dynasties begin to reassert their dominion in a particular region of the galaxy, and they're very aggressive. They're looking for resources, they're looking for planets, they're looking to reclaim caches of weaponry. They're looking to reclaim Noctilith. And if you think about it, actually, the parallels between the Necrons and the Shadows in Babylon 5 is quite strong, because the Necrons spread all of their resources and hid them. So it wasn't so easy for the Eldari just to go to a single homeworld and blow it up. They spread out because it's much easier to survive that way. And so the main goal now is to find a way of reconstructing their biological form and inhabiting that. And the only way to do that is to steal eventually to steal the biological matter out there, to steal life as it is from the existing races, including the Eldari, including the Kroks, but mostly, more importantly, they're likely going to be wanting to steal it from the Imperium, from humans, because they have I guess have the most potential genetically to take as many different forms as possible, given humans mutate, can form Ogryn, can form Ratlins, and so forth. I think that's why humans are quite likely the target of choice for that. And we see that because Necrons also grab from humans things that, because humanity's kind of like this race that was left behind by the old ones as like an ultimate final weapon because of the psychic potential of humans. And clearly the Necrons most probably dabbled a little bit in the early genetics when they had a chance, because we also have the pariah gene, which is this psychic null. And we see pariahs, that brain, that genetic potential utilized in pariah Necrons, which are psychic blank Necrons that are very good at killing psychers. A perfect weapon for a race that hates chaos. And really what's happened then in the later stages of the 41st millennium is the return of Zarek, the Silent King, who had his Dyson sphere tomb world thingamabob out there in the void of space between galaxies, coming back because he's wanting to take charge before things get really out of hand, because the Necrons didn't bank on the Imperium, they didn't bank on the Emperor, they didn't bank on the Astronomican, and the Astronomican is like a bright light to a moth, and the moth in this case is the Tyrannid. And the Tyrannids are essentially the worst that could happen to Sazarek's plans, because if there's another race out there that wants to eat all organic life, it's the Necrons. It's the Tyrannids. So on the one hand, you've got the Necrons just want to make their bodies back again and enslave the other races in the process. The Tyrannids want to eat everything, and yeah, it's just the worst case scenario. I mean, Tyrannids are also a psychically attuned race, though have much more order in how they do it because they have the shadow of the warp. It's it's curious. I really want to see more of a showdown between the Necrons and the Tyrannids. Anyway, so obviously the Imperium and the Inquisition and the Adeptus Mechanicus have been out in the galaxy recovering things from Necron tomb worlds or remains of the Necrons. Examples would be the Catan phase sword or phase daggers, which are basically made of the Catan version of Necrodermis. So it's this like living metal, and there's examples in there's stories of like I think of a Calidus assassin trying to kill someone and the blade getting reabsorbed because it's actually like a shard of the deceiver or something like that. I think that's an old story when the deceiver had much more power before they did the retcon on material. But you get the idea. There's all these wonderful ancient weapons. What's the psychic null assassin that the imp have? But that's a pretty good example of the pariah gene, which the Necrons are harvesting, the brains of to utilize.
Silent Sisters as well. We've got those as
Yeah,
well.
exactly. So yeah, in year 744 M41, the Silent King returns to the galaxy, and obviously again ahead of his schedule to deal with all manner of things that are going wrong, including Tyranids, including chaos, and of course, in this madness, we have the Necrons also having to deal with the fact that whereas before they left the galaxy where there were very small pockets of the immaterium spilling into real space, such as the Maelstrom and so forth, we now have
It's a bit
the
bigger.
Eye of Terror, which is just a bad thing already. But that was kind of good for the Necrons because
Yeah.
that eliminated the Eldar homeworlds and basically accelerated the
Basically,
Eldari demise. The problem is that I guess the Necrons weren't banking on Blackstone being in the reverse resonance to rip apart the physical reality to allow chaos to spill in even greater. And so there's a whole network of like locations across the galaxy where this resonance occurred from one end, which obviously the Eye of Terror and Cadia with the pylons, all the way through to some I can't remember what it's called. There was some anomaly, but that basically means why we have the great rift, the Cycradix Maledictum, and that is pure chaos spilling out into the galaxy. And the Necrons' plans are now to essentially put up more and more pylons and to create regions of space which are effectively free of chaos and psychic null areas. So on living races, even if you're not a psychic person, the effect it has upon you of being in these regions of space is quite disconcerting to the point that it drives you mad.
Isn't also like the homeworld, like where they're kind of based off at the moment, the Necrons smack bang in the middle of the Citrix Maledictum.
Oh, I don't know if it's in the middle of that.
It's really close. I think that they were like on the edge of it or something in a really
I'm looking at a
convenient.
galactic map right now.
Unless I'm thinking of maybe one of the campaigns that I saw.
Because there's the various there's the Pariah Nexus that they've created.
That's I'm thinking of the Pariah Nexus.
That's somewhere else. I can't remember where exactly that is. There's I don't know where there's a Blackstone fortress that apparently is near the very center of the galaxy. That's marked on the Necron map, the core book. There's another Blackstone fortress that's marked way off in the galactic east, and I think that's the Blackstone fortress, obviously of
the game
Warhammer Quest. And then there's also another one far off in the galactic northwest, which is mostly quite near Tau. Oh, is that near Tau? I can't remember where Tau.
That'll be the Farsight Enclave if it's northwest.
Yeah. So, there's still some Blackstones out there, which will be of importance. The Necrons will want them because, again, I'm sure if the resonance is attuned correctly, a Blackstone can also seal rift as well. So the Necrons are interesting, and I think aren't there there's examples in stories in novellas and stuff from Black Library of the Necrons in teaming up with the Imperium when it's a particular enemy. So Tyranids are a good example. the Necrons are just like, no, we need them dead as well. Like,
Yeah, we'd rather kill the things that are going to eat you than you because we might want your bodies later.
yeah. So Necrons are an interesting bad guy now more than ever. They're very much they are very much the 40k Nagash in the sense that they are pragmatic. They aren't out for just absolute chaos and destruction everywhere. There's a plan, and they want to try and keep to it if they can. And if they can do so, great. And that means they will make alliances where they can, mainly with the Imperium. And the Necrons have also been to various worlds. They've landed a ship on Mars because I think Mars was a tomb world, or at least was where
It's nothing to do with the dragon,
the
but
Void Dragon
the void dragon.
was
That's
asleep.
old lore.
Right, is that old lore now?
I don't know if it's old lore, but I remember it from old times.
Yeah, I think it's mostly still lore, possibly in some respects. It's mostly a shard of the Void Dragon. So there's a lot going on with the Necrons than we can actually say in this episode. But I think the main point is I do think they're a pretty cool bad guy. I do think they've got some interesting elements to them. And I think for Wrath and Glory, then there's a lot of different scope of type of stories we can use them in. I think that's what we should mostly on now and wrap up this episode. So, how I would use Necrons. I think the basic story you can do is obviously tech hunting on some ancient world and uncovering sleeping Necrons in
Like
some way. It could just be a small tomb, or it could be a huge, tomb city.
you can look at things like the comics that they've just done, the kids comics, because one of those has that kind. They go to a tomb world
Yeah.
for that. And doesn't Eisenhorn as well? He goes to a tomb world.
Yeah, but that's not Necrons.
Oh no,
That's something
no,
else.
that's a human.
That's a race that actually lives in tombs, waking up every so often because of the
it's cold.
long cycle of how their planet goes around the world. They have to freeze themselves. Yeah, they're pretty mental. But yeah, I mean, Necrons in going to a tomb world or somewhere that's got some ancient Necron tech is always good fun for that, and that can work for rogue traders. It could work for Imperial Guardsmen. It could work for multiple tiers,
Inquisitors,
or even Space Marines.
Yep.
I think the point is that in that classic kind of Hammer horror style, you uncover an ancient tomb and it starts, and then things start
basically
going
playing
bad.
the Mummy in space.
Yeah. The other thing is looking for Noctilith. Noctilith Blackstone is an important resource to the Imperium. It's an important resource to the Necrons. It's a really important resource to Chaos. So you could quite easily have a scenario where you've got a three-way fight going on over over a cache or over a source of Noctilith between the Imperial agents that you're playing, the Chaos forces that are wanting to take it in their weapon. What are those rings that they make?
Rings?
The big Chaos rings.
Chaos gates.
Yeah, those things. They're made of Noctilith.
Yeah.
Or anything else like that. So that's a good way, and that would be an interesting way to have also end up potentially with an alliance between the Imperial agents and the Necron to stop the machinations of the forces of chaos.
And then you get the interesting bit afterwards for the follow-up campaign of who actually gets it from the Necrons and the Imperium.
Yeah, exactly. Now to work out how you can worm Necrons more into the I would say day to day, but so it's a bit more insidious. I think you're looking at like rogue tech priests, people that have, for whatever reason, sided with the Necrons, and I can see that happening. I don't think Necrons are above doing that, and I was wondering how are there examples of Necrons wearing almost like concealing themselves in like human flesh. I mean, we know there are Necrons that are so mad that they do that, but I mean more in the kind of like full Terminator style, being kind of like undercover.
It's not something that rings a bell with me. Doing that.
But I would think that could be quite interesting, or even weirder would be like the the scarabs
Mm.
is having a kind of scarab that like clamps onto someone's brain, onto their skull,
Oh,
and then starts manipulating them.
yeah, that's made me think of a movie, and I can't remember what it's called. Oh, I don't
But
know.
that would be,
Yeah.
I think that's a way of getting kind of Necrons influencing
Mm.
Imperial society without like a full fucking invasion going on. That that would be, it's not canon, but I think it's perfectly viable.
Well,
Um,
the whole thing with lore in 40k is lore is what you make it. It's
yeah,
such a massive universe that not all of it is going to be covered.
yeah,
So
40k is a weird one because, like, yeah, as we've already said, like everything's valid, nothing is canon because
that's
40k is so diverse depending upon the media that you are enjoying it through. Like, there's a core baseline, but beyond that, there's a lot of weird stuff that you can certainly have some fun. Of course, the other Necrons interact, and that gets back to our Blackstone Fortress. Is to do something where you use Blackstone Fortress as your location for
mm,
the center of your stories, and have Necrons that were powered down, and now for whatever reason, because there's a power source and the Blackstone has powered up, it also powers up Necrons that were left behind.
a rogue
So
trader does something stupid, goes into a black fortress and hits the wrong button, and all hell breaks loose.
so that's kind of what I would go for. I think, and also like within stories, if you're dealing with like your typical battles, if you're looking at your crack squad of of Imperial agents having to fight on a war torn world, they're likely being tasked to go stop a pylon being established somewhere,
Mm.
so that a huge or shut down some trans-dimensional portal that allows Necrons to phase through from their tomb world, stuff
Yeah,
like that. I think that's also kind of valid, and maybe is more appropriate for like Space Marines and crack squads of like of
inquisitorial guard and stuff.
yeah, things like that. And of course, for the Inquisitors, you would also be looking for the Inquisition would be looking for like um rogue artifacts of the Necrons that are being used by various nefarious groups and agents.
For maybe their own use, or for maybe destroying,
Oh yeah,
depending on
likely.
whether
Yeah, I mean,
defense
remember,
use.
there's crazy Inquisitors out there that go, yeah, I don't want you using that, but I want to use it because I think this will defeat the great enemy or something. Uh, yeah. I mean, you could also play quite easily a game of Marines who are all a kill team of the, what are they called?
Death Death Watch.
Death Watch, yeah, because they're anti-Xenos, so Necrons fall into their purview.
Remedict.
Yeah, so I think there's actually quite a lot you can do with Necrons, and I think, and we've not seen Necrons. I don't think there's a single example of Necrons in the old RPG books.
No.
Likely because nobody really thought about how you.
Also, I think the Death Watch you might have got them in, but Rogue Trader I think it's too. The original concept is maybe older than the modern fluff for them to have actually appeared in.
Yeah. So I think that kind of covers ideas for it. Now, we do have some suggested, and we're going to finish up here. We're going to quickly just go through, and this will be on the blog, some suggestions on how to represent a Necron warrior in the RPG. So I took as my baseline a Nurgle Plague Marine,
Yeah,
because
the resilience.
Necrons have to be resilient. So Strength 7, that's part of a Space Marine. Defense 3, which is lower than a Space Marine, because I wanted to get the sense that these are slow shambling that tomb mind. Like they're gonna they don't need to defend. They're gonna regenerate, right?
Yeah,
Um,
they
Agility
get
7,
back up
that's
again.
just for shooting and combat. Resilience 13 with what I call natural armor, but that would be their exoskeleton armor of 5. So, they're pretty tough. They're like not quite as tough as a plague marine, but there's a reason why they don't need quite as toughness 7, yeah. Determination 76, because that means they can easily turn a lot of wounds into shock. And they've got willpower 6, but I think with the tier that they would be equivalent in the maths, they work out shock 8. So they can weather tons of damage.
Which makes sense.
Intellect 2, they don't need to think.
I
And
don't think they
speed
can think.
no, right? Speed 5, they don't need to be that fast. Fellowship 1, of course.
We don't need no friends where we're going.
Initiative 2, they're slow. Wounds 11, so that's more than a standard Space Marine, which, in this. So that would be equivalent in the war game anyway. Passive awareness 3, resolve 5, conviction 6. These are all things that basically say they're slow-witted, but they're not going to run from a fight.
It's an
Intimidation
unthinking
6.
Terminator.
Yeah. Sorry?
It's an unthinking Terminator.
Yeah. Weapon skill 8, equivalent to a Marine. Ballistic skill 8, a Marine.
Yep.
Default for the rest of their skills, I thought was 4 because they're not quite as with it as a Marine.
Yeah.
And then finally, a Gauss rifle, I would say, has the same. I didn't put the ranges unless I have to. Is I based off a bolt gun, okay? Because stats wise, their strength and range and so forth is like a bolt gun. But what's more important with it? Like a bolt gun, they're brutal. That makes sense. So you're more likely on an extra damage dice to get a exalted icon, so it does more damage. So a 3 is a 4, and a 4 is a 5, and a 5 is a 6. So
you've got two chances there. So
yeah, you've got a lot more chance of doing damage. But the most important thing is rending 3. So that means that if you've got on your successes to hit, you can shift an exalted icon to activate rending 3, which means it gets -3. It gets a armor penetration of 3, which represents its Gauss capability of flaying, armor away.
Yeah, I suppose so. So just for those people who don't know what a Gauss weapon is, they're basically electrical lightning whip rifles.
Yeah, they're like they're they basically flay you apart atom by atom.
With green fire.
Yeah, like a Gauss. That's a Gauss blaster. What is it? Sorry, a Gauss. What did I say? This is Gauss rifle. What does that? I'm sorry. I'm looking at a Gauss. What's the weapon that a Necron? Sorry, I'm actually looking at the army book here. I wanted to get the right name. Where are we? That's elite queues on basic troops. That's fast attack guard, flay ones, death models. Necron warrior. It's a Gauss flayer. So a Gauss rifle is now called a Gauss flayer. That's where I was wrong. Okay, so a Gauss flayer
because it flames apart.
Yeah, is 24 inches, rapid fire 1, so that's salvo like a bolt gun. Yep. Strength 4, AP -1. Is a bolt gun AP +1 in the?
I don't possibly. I don't know if bolt guns are actually AP.
And it's got a damage of 1, but I went with. I thought rending 3 feels more fun.
Yeah.
It feels narratively more correct. Anyway, and then
it's the theme of the weapon.
Yeah, and then we've got obviously at the end of these weapons is kind of like a scythe, so it's got a basic close combat weapon attack with it, which is strength +3 +3 ED. That's a standard. That's equivalent to like an orc chopper. That's all right. Yeah. And then the fun rules are machine resilience. So you don't need to spend ruin to roll determination for a Necron warrior. And it can roll determination even against mortal wounds.
Yeah.
And then it's got get back up, which is you can spend a point of ruin to regain 1d3 wounds and stand back up.
So basically the Wrath and Glory version of reanimation.
Yeah. And I think that makes them kind of tough as it is. That sounds like a terrifying opponent for a bunch of Astra Militarum.
Yeah, if you're throwing guards at that, then the guards are in a bit of trouble.
Yeah, they're going to have to like pummel it with las weaponry and like chuck a grenade or two at it and hope they. I think that'd be really fun. A fun scenario is just actually a bunch of Astra Militarum facing like a single Necron warrior that just doesn't give up.
Yeah, it's just a random. They find a random Necron kind of buried in a swamp somewhere that's turned itself down. Someone decides to plug a power pack into it and go, "Oh shit, what have we done?"
And I think what's fair is the way that ruin works in Wrath and Glory. You can base. I think mostly the get back up has to be spent that turn on the Necron. Otherwise, they phase out, and that way you get the balance of you don't just have all the Necrons that are lying down just have a chance of getting back up. You have to get them back up immediately, or else they phase out.
Well, that's kind of how it works in 40k as well. You get your reanimation protocol after a single unit has completed all their shooting at it, and then you do your reanimation protocol. So it
But yeah,
happens straight away. And
I
if
think
you
that's
don't succeed, they disappear.
I think that's I think that sounds looks kind of fun.
Oh, the other just so people know, the phasing out thing of Necrons is they don't die and they don't get destroyed. They get beamed back to their tomb worlds.
Yeah.
So you've not they're insanely hard to kill because they don't die. They just go back to where they were born, get rebuilt, and then get sent out again.
Do you know what I'm really waiting for though? In 40k, I'm
What?
waiting for the what are they called? Well, I can't think of their name.
Squats.
No, Space Skaven. What's the name of Space Skaven? Hrud
Crud. Yes.
to turn up because Hrud apparently all their weaponry and science, from what we know from a very short story somewhere that was in the lead up to Psychic Awakening, of a bit of Psychic Awakening, Hrud operate using entropic like energy,
Yeah.
entropic science. So basically, they're like this weird
They
kind of
basically entropy. They just kind of destroy the entropy of the thing, so the thing kind of doesn't really exist anymore. So it can't get
and
back up.
and it messes with Necron technology. They
Yeah.
do not like it. So I am keen to see them turn up in 40k and then have them in Wrath and Glory. Because, like, could you imagine where a rogue trader's like, and this is a Hrud in my party, and it's like, what the heck have you got there? Why has it got this weird, entropic Jezzail weaponry that basically is like a disruptor cannon and
Just running around stealing shit as well.
is perfect against like killing Necrons. Yeah, that'll be fun. I think that's it.
Well, that's it. Yeah.
As I say, we'll put that up on the blog. So comments are welcome. Obviously, it's unofficial, so do what you want with it. That's not a problem. And to finish up, if you enjoy this content, if you have any questions or comments, email us at darkdaysradio@gmail.com. Head over to our Facebook, Dark Days Radio, or you can go to our Instagram at Dark Days Radio. You can find stream games that we've done on YouTube. You can find us on Twitch when we start doing stream games again. It's been a while because of Christmas and everything else. Everyone's super busy. And of course, you can come over to our Discord channel, Dark Days Radio, and all that's in the show notes. So you can come over to Discord and chat about this episode or anything else, or chat about our main show, Dark Days Radio, where we talk about horror games in general. But that's everything for now. And next time we're back, I think there's something planned. Mike has talked about something. So, we'll see what we've got planned. There's mostly something we want to cover, mostly Warhammer world based, old world based.
Ooh.
I don't know. We'll see. But that's everything for now. So thanks, David, for taking time out for recording
No
this.
worries. Anytime.
A primer on Necrons. And we'll speak to everyone. So goodbye for now.
Goodbye.